The house was quiet that evening. Outside, the sky had a soft orange glow as the sun slowly sank behind the trees. Sandra Bullock sat on her living room couch, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. The room was filled with a gentle silence, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. She had been busy all week with work, interviews, and endless schedules. But now she was finally home. For the first time in days, she felt the weight of stillness settle around her. Yet in that stillness, her thoughts wandered to a name she could not escape: Keanu Reeves. They had known each other for years. They had shared movie sets, long hours under bright lights, laughter in between scenes, and the kind of silence only two people who trusted each other could carry without discomfort. Sandra respected him deeply, not just for his talent, but for his quiet humility. There was something about the way he listened, how he never tried to dominate a room but always made space for others. She had felt drawn to that for a long time. Still, she had never told him. She leaned back against the couch, closing her eyes, replaying moments in her mind. The way Keanu had once brought her coffee without asking, because he noticed she looked tired. The way he gave up his seat for someone on set when there weren't enough chairs. The way he always asked the crew about their families, their struggles, as if their stories mattered more than his fame. Every little gesture left an imprint on her heart, and yet every time she thought of saying something, her voice froze. She feared the silence that might follow. What if he did not feel the same? What if speaking the truth meant breaking the balance they had carefully built over years of friendship? Her phone buzzed suddenly on the coffee table. She opened her eyes, startled. Her hands shook slightly as she picked it up. It was a message. "Hey, Sandra, I'll be in town tomorrow. Thought of stopping by, if that's okay." Keanu. Her heart skipped. She read the words again, slower this time, almost afraid they would disappear. He wanted to come over. After so many months apart, after so many interviews, films, and public appearances, he wanted to visit her at home. She smiled, but her chest tightened with nerves. She whispered to herself, "What will I say to him? What if I cannot hide it this time?" That night, she found herself walking through her house, checking every corner as if it mattered. She adjusted the cushions on the couch, rearranged the books on the shelf, even lit a candle on the table. It wasn't about the house. It was about her heart, which suddenly felt unprepared. Memories of their last meeting rushed back. It was during an award show. She remembered how he had looked at her from across the hall, smiling quietly, almost shyly, as if the chaos of flashing cameras did not exist. She remembered how he hugged her, longer than a simple hello, but not enough for anyone else to notice. To the world, it was nothing. But to her, it was everything. As the night grew deeper, the silence in her house turned heavier. She sat near the window, looking at the stars, and her thoughts turned into a quiet storm. What if tomorrow changed everything? What if tomorrow the truth would no longer hide between them? She wanted to believe she was ready, but her heart whispered a different truth. She had always loved him, yet she had never dared to say it, and tomorrow, with Keanu sitting in her living room with his calm presence filling the silence, she would have to decide if her silence could last any longer. The thought both frightened and excited her. Her tea had gone cold, but her heart was burning. That night, she barely slept. Her mind played endless scenes of what could happen. Words she could say, words she could not. Moments that might bloom, or moments that might shatter. It was a battle between hope and fear, and neither side was willing to surrender. By morning, she knew only one thing. Tomorrow would not be just another day. It would be the beginning of something she could not yet name. And somewhere deep inside, she prayed that kindness, the very thing that had always defined Keanu, would also protect her fragile truth when it finally came out. The morning sunlight touched the curtains softly. But for Sandra Bullock, the warmth of the day felt more like a fire inside her chest. She moved around her kitchen with a nervous energy she could not hide. She told herself again and again that it was just a visit, nothing more. Keanu was a friend. He had always been a friend. Yet the thought of him walking through her door filled her with an anxiety that felt strangely beautiful. She prepared small details she thought no one would notice. She set out 2 cups on the counter as if preparing for coffee later. She arranged the flowers on the table, pausing longer than she needed to, wondering if the colors felt too intentional. She even changed the position of a chair because she knew Keanu liked sitting where sunlight touched his shoulder. Every little thing reminded her of him, and every small preparation whispered the truth she carried in silence. As she worked, her mind kept pulling her back to their shared past. She remembered the film set years ago when she had been overwhelmed after a long day. Cameras, lines, and endless directions left her tired. Then, without a word, Keanu had placed a sandwich near her chair. He didn't ask if she was hungry, didn't make it into a gesture that needed thanks. He just walked away quietly, as if kindness was something natural, not something to be praised. That moment never left her. It wasn't about the sandwich. It was about being seen without having to ask. She realized then that Keanu had a gift. He noticed things others didn't. He saw the exhaustion, the quiet struggles, the hidden worries, and he answered them with actions instead of words. And maybe that was why she had fallen for him, because he made silence feel safe. But now, that silence had turned into her biggest challenge. She wanted to tell him what she felt, but fear kept her locked. Her phone buzzed again, startling her out of her thoughts. It was a short text. On my way. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked around her house one last time, breathing in deep, trying to calm herself. The clock ticked slowly, but her heart raced faster. Every second felt like an hour. Then came the sound she had been waiting for. A gentle knock at the door. She froze. For a moment, she wanted to run, to hide, to pretend she wasn't home. But she took a breath and walked forward. When she opened the door, there he was. Keanu Reeves, standing in the doorway with that same quiet smile, his hands holding a small bag of books. His hair fell slightly across his face, and his eyes carried that same warmth she had always known. He looked at her as if time had not passed, as if the distance of months had vanished in that single moment. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," she whispered back, her voice catching in her throat. He stepped inside, and instantly, the room felt different. It was no longer just her house. It was their space now. The air shifted, heavier with unspoken words, lighter with the comfort of his presence. They sat on the couch, and he placed the bag down. "I brought you something," he said, pulling out a worn book. "Thought you might like this one. It reminded me of you." She looked at the cover, her fingers tracing the title. Her heart swelled. Not because of the book itself, but because he had thought of her when he saw it. That small detail meant more than any grand gesture. Their conversation began lightly. Movies, mutual friends, little stories of the past weeks. But beneath every word, Sandra felt something else, something unsaid, running between them like a secret current. There were pauses, long ones, where their eyes met and lingered. Moments when silence carried more weight than their sentences. She found herself watching his hands as he spoke, noticing how calm they were, steady, almost reassuring. Suddenly, a memory struck her, a time years ago when they had been walking back from dinner after a shoot. She had tripped slightly on a loose stone, and without thinking, Keanu caught her hand. It was a small thing, but she remembered how warm his touch had been. She had wanted to never let go. Now, sitting beside him again, she wondered if he remembered it too. Her chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to break the invisible wall. She wanted to tell him that every little kindness of his had stayed with her, shaping feelings she could no longer contain. But her lips stayed sealed. Instead, she smiled, covering her fear with ease, and asked, "So, how have you really been?" He looked at her for a long second before answering. His eyes softened, and he said quietly, "Honestly, it feels good to just be here." Those words lingered in the air, pulling her heart closer to his. It was not a grand confession, not a declaration. But for Sandra, it felt like a door opening, just enough for light to slip in. Yet even as her heart soared, doubt whispered inside her mind. Maybe he only meant friendship. Maybe she was reading too much into his words. Maybe silence was safer. Still, as the day unfolded, she realized something important. Sometimes the most powerful stories are written not in loud declarations, but in the pauses, the looks, the quiet truths that wait patiently for their moment. And Sandra knew, deep inside, that her moment was coming soon. The afternoon sun poured softly through the living room window, painting golden lines across the floor. Sandra sat across from Keanu, her hands resting gently on her lap, though her heart beat hard enough to shake her chest. She had been around him so many times before, on sets, in interviews, at crowded events filled with lights and cameras, but somehow this moment felt heavier. Maybe because here, in the stillness of her home, there were no distractions, no cameras, no roles to play. It was just them. Keanu leaned back against the couch, his eyes calm, his voice steady as he told her about his recent travels. He spoke about quiet mornings on film locations, about meeting ordinary people who left extraordinary impressions on him. His words carried a weight of sincerity that made Sandra fall deeper into listening. It wasn't what he said, but how he said it. Measured, thoughtful, as though each word deserved respect. Yet, while he spoke, her mind was caught between his words and her own silence. Every glance she stole at him pulled her further into a maze of emotions. His kindness was obvious, his humility untouched by years of fame, and she wondered again, why had she never found the courage to tell him what she felt? Was it fear of rejection? Or was it the fragile beauty of their friendship that she could not risk breaking? The sound of laughter suddenly broke her thoughts. It wasn't hers, it was his. He had shared something lighthearted, a funny moment with an old friend, and Sandra found herself laughing too, though her laughter felt softer, more vulnerable. It reminded her of years ago when they would sit between takes on set, sharing jokes no one else understood, as if the world had shrunk down to only two people. But just as quickly as laughter filled the air, silence returned, and that silence carried tension. She noticed the way Keanu's eyes lingered on hers for a moment longer than usual. There was no rush in his look, no pressure, just a quiet searching, as if he wanted to say something but didn't. Her pulse quickened. To fill the silence, she stood and asked if he wanted coffee. He nodded with that gentle smile, the one that always seemed to say more than his words. As she walked into the kitchen, she caught her reflection in the microwave glass. She paused. Her own eyes looked nervous, hopeful, and a little afraid. She whispered to herself, "You can't keep running from this." Not forever. Her hands shook slightly as she prepared the cups. She remembered the countless cups of coffee they had shared on sets, him always preferring it plain, her adding a little sugar. She smiled at the memory, but felt the weight of the present moment pressing harder. Returning to the living room, she handed him the cup. His fingers brushed against hers, and though it lasted only a second, the touch was enough to send a quiet storm through her chest. "Thank you," he said softly. She sat back down, trying to calm her breath. They sipped in silence for a moment, and then Keanu spoke again, his tone quieter this time. "You know, I've always liked how peaceful your home feels. It's different. It feels safe here." Those words struck her deeply. Safe. It wasn't just about the house. It was about her. She realized he felt comfortable here, with her, in this space they were sharing. Her lips parted as if to reply, but the words caught in her throat. She wanted to say, "You feel safe for me too." She wanted to say, "I wish you knew what you mean to me." But all she managed was a small smile. To shift the moment, she asked, "Do you remember the first time we met?" He nodded, his eyes glinting with memory. "Yeah, you were nervous. I remember you kept checking your script over and over like you were about to take an exam." She laughed softly. "And you were so calm, it annoyed me." "I wasn't calm," he admitted. "I was just hiding it better." She tilted her head, surprised. He had never told her that. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the room seemed to grow smaller. There was a quiet intimacy in the air, a closeness that didn't need words. But before either of them could speak, her phone buzzed loudly on the table, shattering the fragile atmosphere. She reached for it quickly, embarrassed. It was only a message from a friend, but the interruption left her heart aching. Keanu leaned forward, setting his cup down. "You okay?" She nodded quickly. "Yeah, just a message." But inside, she wasn't okay. Inside, she was drowning in the battle between fear and hope. As the hours passed, the visit turned into a stretch of conversations about life, about people they missed, about choices they had made. Sandra found herself learning new things about him, even after all these years. She saw the sadness in his eyes when he spoke of loss, the strength in his voice when he spoke of resilience, and it hit her harder than ever. She wasn't just drawn to his kindness or his humility. She was drawn to his strength, the quiet kind that comes from surviving storms without showing the world how hard they hit. As evening began to fall, a question echoed in her heart. How long could she keep this truth locked away? How long before her silence broke her more than rejection ever could? She looked at him, sitting comfortably on her couch, his presence filling her home, and she knew something had to change. The evening sky outside shifted to shades of purple and deep blue, and the soft glow of the lamps inside Sandra's home wrapped the room in quiet warmth. Yet despite the calm setting, her heart refused to settle. She watched Keanu as he sat across from her, relaxed, one arm resting on the edge of the couch, his expression carrying that familiar stillness that always made people feel safe. To anyone else, it would have looked like two friends spending an ordinary evening together. But inside her, it felt like a storm waiting to break. She had spent years hiding her feelings, tucking them behind smiles and casual words. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way his eyes lingered a moment too long, or maybe it was the way he seemed at home in her silence. Whatever it was, Sandra felt the weight of time pressing against her. She couldn't hide forever. Her voice trembled slightly as she asked, "Do you ever wonder about the choices we never made?" He looked at her with quiet curiosity, his brow tilting, not in judgment but in thought. "All the time," he admitted, his tone calm but layered with something deeper. "Life is full of them. Sometimes I wonder how different things would look if I had said yes instead of no, or spoken when I stayed quiet." Her chest tightened at his words. It was as if he had reached into her own thoughts and pulled them out into the open. She forced a small smile. "Funny, I was just thinking the same thing." A pause followed, long and heavy. Their eyes met, and in that silence was a truth neither had the courage to speak. To break the moment, she rose and walked toward the window, staring out at the faint city lights in the distance. Sometimes I feel like people only see the version of me they want to see. The actress, the one who's always smiling, always strong, but at home, it's different. I'm just me." Keanu's voice came gently from behind her. "And that's the best version." She turned her head slightly, surprised by the softness in his tone. He wasn't trying to flatter her. He meant it simply and honestly the way he always did, and that honesty shook her more than any grand speech could. Memories began to flood her mind. The rap party years ago when she had felt out of place, overwhelmed by the noise and attention. It was Keanu who had quietly slipped her a note that read, "Meet me outside if you need air." She had stepped out, and there he was, leaning against a wall, offering her the quiet she needed. She had never told him, but that single act had meant more to her than the entire night combined. And here he was again, years later, still offering her the kind of safety she couldn't put into words. She took a breath, trying to steady herself. "Keanu, have you ever felt something you couldn't say out loud? Like if you spoke it, everything might change?" He was silent for a moment. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his eyes steady on hers. "Yes," he said simply, her pulse raced. She wanted to ask him what he meant, what he was holding back, but fear chained her tongue. Instead, she lowered her eyes and whispered, "Sometimes I think silence is easier." He nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what she meant. But silence can also be heavy. Sometimes it hurts more than words. His response left her breathless. She felt as if they were both speaking in code, circling around a truth neither of them dared to name. Just then, a soft knock came at the door. The sound startled her, breaking the fragile air between them. She opened it to find a neighbor returning a borrowed book. They exchanged quick words, but Sandra's heart wasn't in the small talk. When she closed the door again, she felt the weight of the interruption. Returning to the couch, she noticed Keanu watching her, his eyes carrying something deeper than she had seen before. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but her voice betrayed her. "Yeah, just..." Sometimes I wonder if we wait too long to say the things that matter." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Her cheeks burned and she turned her face slightly, afraid of what she might see in his expression. But when she finally dared to glance at him, he wasn't surprised. He just looked at her with that same quiet steadiness, as though he had been waiting for her to say something like this all along. The room fell into silence again, but this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt charged, alive, like the air before a storm. Sandra's heart pounded. She wanted to step forward, to cross the line between friendship and something more. But fear still whispered its warnings. She told herself one thing: if not tonight, then soon. Because silence was no longer enough. The night deepened, and with it came a different kind of stillness. The city outside moved on with its noise and lights, but inside Sandra's home, time felt suspended. She sat close to Keanu now, closer than before, almost as if the space between them had begun to shrink on its own. The soft hum of the lamp filled the silence, yet every heartbeat sounded louder in her chest. She tried to focus on the warmth of the tea in her hands, but her mind kept circling back to his words from earlier. Silence can also be heavy. She wondered if he had been speaking about himself, about her, about both of them. Her breath caught at the thought. "Do you ever feel like life is waiting for us to be braver?" she asked suddenly, her voice quieter than she intended. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting something deep and unspoken. "Yes," he said. "But bravery doesn't always show up when we want it to. Sometimes it waits. Until we're ready." His words sank into her heart. Maybe she wasn't ready before. Maybe he wasn't either. But tonight, everything inside her was pushing her closer to the edge of confession. She leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. You know, people always assume life is about big moments, the awards, the premieres, the headlines. But the truth is, the things I remember most are small. Someone bringing me water when I was exhausted. Someone noticing I wasn't okay. Those are the things that stay. He nodded gently. "I know what you mean. The quiet kindness. That's what lasts." Their eyes met again, and in that gaze, Sandra felt the weight of years between them, the unspoken care, the moments overlooked, the truth waiting beneath every smile. Her chest ached with the pull to say it, but fear clung tighter. What if she ruined what they had? What if he only saw her as a friend? To distract herself, she asked him to tell her a story. He began sharing about a stranger he once met during his travels, a man who had lost almost everything but still gave away what little food he had to someone hungrier than him. As Keanu spoke, his voice softened and Sandra watched him, realizing why she loved him even more. He didn't just admire kindness. He carried it, lived it, made it part of who he was. And then, out of nowhere, she remembered a night long ago when they had wrapped a film. She had been sitting in her trailer, tired and lonely, and he had knocked gently on her door. When she opened it, he didn't say much. He simply handed her a small flower he had picked on his way back. She had laughed at the simplicity of it, but deep inside, that single gesture had touched her more than anything else that day. Now, sitting beside him again, she realized she had been carrying that flower in her memory all these years, holding it as a quiet symbol of what she never admitted. The silence in the room grew thick again. She placed her cup on the table and whispered, almost without thinking, "Sometimes I feel like I've been holding something inside for too long." Keanu's gaze sharpened slightly, not with pressure, but with understanding. "You don't have to say it until you're ready," he told her gently. "But I'll listen." Whenever you do, her throat tightened. He always did that, gave her space, gave her safety. It was both comforting and frustrating, because it meant she had to find the courage herself. She looked at him, her voice trembling. And what if the words change everything? He leaned back, his eyes soft but steady. Then maybe it's because they were meant to. Her breath caught. She could feel the moment pressing against her, urging her to speak. Every second felt like a crossroad. She could stay silent and keep the safety of friendship, or she could take the leap and risk the unknown. Before she could decide, thunder rumbled faintly outside, followed by a soft patter of rain against the window. The sound filled the room, and in that fragile moment, Sandra felt her walls weaken. She turned toward him, her lips parting, ready to speak the words she had buried for so long. But as her heart prepared to leap, her phone rang suddenly, slicing through the atmosphere with its sharp tone. She flinched, reaching quickly to silence it, but the moment was broken. Her courage slipped back into silence. Keanu noticed, but he didn't push. Instead, he simply smiled gently, as though telling her it was okay. That time would come again. And though her heart ached at the missed chance, she realized something important. Every interruption, every pause, was only making the truth inside her grow stronger. And sooner or later, silence would no longer be enough to hold it back. The rain outside had grown heavier, the drops tapping against the windows like a quiet rhythm that filled the silence between them. Sandra sat with her hands folded tightly, her heart aching from the moment she had let slip away. She could still feel the words sitting on the edge of her tongue, trembling, begging to be spoken. But fear had stolen them once again. Keanu leaned back on the couch, his eyes calm as always, but softer now, as if he could sense her inner battle. He didn't press, didn't demand, didn't break the silence. He simply sat there with her, as he had always done, making her feel less alone even when she said nothing. The storm outside seemed to mirror the storm inside her. The thunder rolled again, and the sound pushed her thoughts deeper. She asked herself, how long could she keep hiding behind silence? How many more chances would life give her before the truth slipped away forever? She looked at him, really looked. The kindness etched in his face, the patience in his eyes, the quiet strength that had always drawn her in. And suddenly she knew this was the moment. Not perfect, not scripted, not grand, but real. Her voice trembled as she spoke, barely above a whisper. Keanu, there's something I've never told you. His eyes met hers, steady and open. What is it? Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out. I think I've been in love with you for a long time. And I never said it because I was afraid. Afraid it might change us. Afraid I might lose you. The air between them grew still, so still she could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Her hand shook, and for a second she regretted everything. But then he leaned forward, his voice soft, almost tender. Sandra, I felt the same. Her eyes widened, her breath catching. You have? He nodded, his lips curving into a small smile, the kind that carried both relief and quiet truth. Yes, I just never wanted to risk what we had. You're important to me. Too important. I thought silence was safer. But you're right. Silence can hurt more. Tears welled in her eyes. The weight she had carried for years, the fear, the doubt, it all began to lift. The storm outside still roared, but inside something gentler was unfolding. He reached for her hand, slowly, giving her the chance to pull away, but she didn't. Her fingers slipped into his, and the warmth of his touch was everything she had dreamed of. All this time, she whispered, her voice breaking. All this time. He echoed softly. They sat there, hand in hand, letting the truth settle around them like the rain outside. It wasn't loud, it wasn't rushed. It was quiet, steady, and real. And in that moment, Sandra realized something. Love didn't always arrive with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it was built silently, patiently, over years of kindness and respect, waiting for the right moment to finally be spoken. The hours passed, and the rain eventually softened into a gentle drizzle. Their conversation shifted into lighter things, memories, laughter, the kind of comfort that came only when the hardest words had finally been said. As the night drew to an end, Keanu rose slowly, still holding her hand. I should go, he said softly, though his eyes lingered on hers as if leaving was the hardest choice. She smiled through the tears still clinging to her lashes. Thank you. For telling me, he shook his head lightly. No, thank you. For being brave first. And then, as he leaned forward, his forehead brushed gently against hers, a quiet promise more powerful than words. When he left that night, the house felt different to her. Not empty, not heavy with unspoken things, but filled with a warmth that made her smile even in the silence. She sat back on the couch, her heart still racing, but not from fear anymore. For the first time in years, she felt free, because finally she had spoken. Finally, she had heard the truth she had always longed for, and finally the silence between them had turned into something far more beautiful, love, honest and unhidden.